All right, it's 6:35, so we'll just get right into it. First of all, thank you to everyone that came. I hope that you find Tom's insight very valuable to you for your future career paths. And we would just like to thank Tom for being here. He's just doing this out of his own goodwill, just to help you and just to give back to UB. He's an alumnus here, so if we can just give him a round of applause for Tom.
Thank you.
All right, and we can just get right into it. Um, yeah, so if you could just introduce yourself, your background, where you went to school, who you are, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So Thomas Ryan, I am a husband, a father, a pastor, a coach, and also a manager at Moog. And I listed it in that order because you should never let your work define you. But everywhere you go, people say, "What do you do?" And you give your job. So I start with what I actually do. My work allows me to do all of those things comfortably. I graduated from UB in 2010 with an aerospace and mechanical engineering degree. Got a job right after college. Went back 2 years ago, got my master's in engineering management through UB, and just this week started as manager at Moog. Kind of background.
Can you kind of take us through your career path, beginning in college, maybe through your paths of internships, your first job throughout Moog, and up to where you are now?
Yeah. So I started looking for internships as a sophomore, which is usually pretty early, and got a lot of phone calls and a lot of rejections because I had no experience. In my junior year, ended up getting an internship at a very small company. They made blind rivet nuts, and it was very not exciting. But it was on the resume, some job experience, and had a great time there. They let me work, 10, 15 hours a week as I was a student through winter break. And it really opened up the doors a lot because my GPA was around like a 3.32. When companies like Moog, back when I was a student, it was like, if you don't have a 3.5, you're not even getting looked at. So I ended up applying again for other internships after working there. And I will say, if you've got a lower GPA, getting an internship is going to get you a job. Interning in a smaller company got me, as a senior, an internship at Carleton Technologies. They're now owned by Eaton. So my senior year, I interned at another company who rejected me the year before. But having worked at another small company, gave me something to talk to in the interview process. Knocked the internship out of the park, and had my manager, as I was an intern, really go to bat for me to make sure I got a job right out of college, which is a pretty sweet thing. Coming around May, studying for finals, and not having to worry about a job because you already signed the papers and everything was in play. So at Carleton Technologies, I ended up working for the weapons deployment team. We'll just assume that was normal. Working for the weapons deployment team, and so I was working on bomb racks and different equipment to make sure our troops can come home when they go to war. Helped with a transition from a company down in Florida who actually made life-saving devices for pilots. So if a pilot ejected from a plane and they were unconscious, if they landed in ocean water, lake water, it would sense they're in water, it would inflate their life jacket. Other devices would cut holes in their oxygen mask so they're not just drinking in water unconscious. So that one was fun. That dealt with a lot of small electronic explosive devices. As a mechanical engineer, I glazed over for electronics, but the explosives part kept my interest. So, went and got some more training, learned more on that. Worked my way up to be a senior design engineer. So started doing a lot of rapid development projects, gravity bomb racks, rail launchers for Hellfire missiles. Really getting good at it after about 8 years. Wanted to get into management. You get into engineering, you start to find out either you want to do it the rest of your life or you want to start getting into some other things. And I was leaning more towards management. Kind of hit a glass ceiling at Carleton. They ended up picking somebody else, so I applied to Moog. Got to Moog about 4.5 years ago as a project engineer. So instead of design, as a project engineer, just working project execution, cost, budget, meeting with customers, visiting suppliers when there's issues, supporting test failures. worked my way through that on a lot of fun stuff, more military aircraft projects. And now I'm the manager for Moog Defense over project engineers and systems engineers, working on missiles, torpedoes, tanks. To me, all the fun stuff.
Between your job, between the few jobs that you had, what did you do specifically? Like, what was your role in the company? Like, what were you doing, like, hands-on?
Yeah. So usually when you start out of school, you don't know much, even though you busted your butt. And so you get thrown on usually like, depending on the size of your company, the first one I worked at was a small company. And so you wore a lot of hats as an engineer. So I was the product engineer, the test engineer, the project engineer, the design engineer. And really what that boiled down to is they had products that they're already qualified, they're in production. They kind of say, go learn on that. There's nothing new, but you got to learn the products we do. And so it's great experience to get in, working alongside technicians, learning how products are built. Especially here at UB, there's not a lot of design work. There's not a lot of hands-on opportunities. So when you get a job, try to get involved with that kind of stuff. A lot of NC dispositions. So parts come in from suppliers and they're not made right. And you've got to decide, can we use it? Because it's either going in a product that's going to save someone's life, or it's got to work, or our soldiers aren't coming home. And so you've got to use what you learn here is how to solve problems. And so you start looking at drawings, you start deciding, is this acceptable? And so a lot of it's that small hands-on stuff. I did travel a lot around my second and third year at work. The older guys are tired of traveling, so that the younger guys go. So I got to go to Texas, Virginia, California, all over supporting testing, qualification testing, visiting suppliers, learning how they machine parts or make parts, and then later getting into more design lead stuff where now you're getting customer specs and you're trying to say, I've got to design something to meet this requirement. How do I do that? And so you're working with the guys who paid attention in MATLAB and they're running the analysis, and or you're going to work with the guys who do all the stress calcs. And so it's really interesting in industry. You don't need to know everything. You need to know who to ask if you don't know. So don't get worried if you're like, man, if I have to code another thing. There are people who love coding and they will do that at your job, and you'll just go and ask for help. So really got used to a lot of different things in that vein. And then now at Moog, as a project engineer, is kind of overseeing the entire life cycle of a program. So initial proposals and bids, organizing the teams to make sure you can deliver all the different gate review designs, working with supply chain that you're getting suppliers lined up, your test equipment people who are designing how you're going to test the product. It's amazing how much people don't think about, I've got to build this, but I also have to test it. So a lot of dynamics going in, and depending on the size of the company, you can be siloed and just do that. Or if it's a smaller company, usually you're doing everything, which actually gets you a lot of experience and I think helps you be a better engineer.
So you talked about how you didn't have the best GPA, so getting internships really helps you to land a job. So can you take us through the steps that you took to, first of all, land an internship, and throughout your promotions as your career progressed, how you landed each position that you got?
Yeah. So the internship, if you're a sophomore, junior, just apply to anything that interests you. And I definitely recommend applying to ones that don't, so you can get an interview and not care if you botch it. Learn how to talk on the phone, learn what kind of questions they're asking. I started looking, anytime you apply to a place, at least look at their website, see what interests you, because the first phone call you get, they're going to tell right away if you're just randomly applying or if you're like actually interested in what they're doing, and they're more likely to hire somebody who's looked on their website, knows the products. And it was funny, the first company I interned at was Shearex Fastening Solutions. They're out in Tonawanda. I don't even remember applying. It was like months later, I got an email and they were like, hey, you want to come interview? Yes, I need a job. And so that actually worked out really well. And that was kind of that early approach of I applied everywhere. I applied to Boeing. The first phone call I got, they asked, have you ever worked on a plane? As a sophomore in college, I was like, I've flown. Does that count? And they said no. So, you get those rejections, but you start kind of getting some resolve and saying, okay, I know what kind of questions they're asking. I'm not as nervous for the ones that I want to get into. After you get your first internship, the next one, is hopefully a company that you really are interested in, the products that they're doing. To me, if you're passionate about what they're doing, you're going to interview way better than if it's just like, I really need a job. Having the previous internship, those are the talking points now. It wasn't the classes you took or the group projects you did. You're saying, I've done real world work, I supported this. And you get a little creative with the tasks you've done and how to make them sound a little more elegant. So it's okay to wordsmith, and instead of like stacking papers, like, well, I organize things, right? And so certain phrases you can put on your resume that's going to draw attention, and then be thinking about what you can talk to during those interviews. And remembering, if you're going for an internship, they're not expecting you to know everything. It's okay to say you don't, but to be willing to learn, to be humble enough to ask for help is really the biggest thing. And then once I landed my second internship, I'm getting close to graduation. I still applied to other companies because it's nice if you can have another job offer, but then you start talking to your boss while you're interning and saying, hey, I'm applying other places. If you want to keep me, I'd like to stay here. Can we start talking about an offer? And so they actually, if you do well, they created a position. It was like a development engineering technician. It was someone who didn't have an engineering degree or much experience but could get a job. And so I was officially hired before I graduated, and then they turned it into a slight promotion after the diploma came in to become a design engineer. And so you really want to just be talking with whoever your manager is for the internships. And again, hopefully you're really doing a good job. Otherwise, they're going to kindly just let you go, and you won't have much to probably talk about at other interviews. Once I started working, it's difficult because you'll get a job, and then you're going to hear all of your friends who got jobs in other states and other places, and you're going to hear the salaries they make, and you're going to go, man, I feel like I really got undersold here. And then you forget about cost of living and what it costs them to pay for rent. And so I will say your first job is going to be the lowest amount of money. The fastest way to make money is to change jobs. However, if you do that too quickly, people are going to start looking and saying, you seem to just be changing and you're not really learning stuff. And so you got to be very careful about taking that first job and then trying to jump just to chase the money. Really try to find something that you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing. And so the first couple of years, just working hard. I kept getting the highest ranks on performance reviews, getting 5% raises each year. And then around 3 to 4 years, you kind of look around. I feel like I could be worth more. And so I would go on to different websites and looking up what is the salary for someone with mid experience. And then I'd go to my boss and say, hey, I feel like I'm worth this. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm doing. And you kind of have those conversations to get that 10% bump instead of waiting the 2 to 4% each year. Again, you've got to be working hard. You've got to know what your worth is. A lot of people just won't ask. And companies aren't always just looking to hand you more money. So you really got to be sensitive in these things. I always just took on extra work. So I would get involved with different committees. I would ask other managers if work was low. Hey, I need more work. There are people who will go to work and let 8 hours go by without doing a whole lot. And then there's people who go and they say, man, I am not going to sit at my desk and get paid for nothing. And they go and get work. And those are usually the ones who are going to get promoted, are going to start making waves in their company. And again, the longer you're at one company, the more of an expert you are in that product. And so that's one of the other advantages of staying at one place, being confident in what your worth is, so you're not totally missing the salary gap. But you quickly become, within probably 5 or 6 years, very knowledgeable and an expert almost on a lot of the products you're working. So you become valuable to the company.
As a college student, what experience and qualities are desired just heading into your first internship or first job or extracurricular activities?
I will say from working, the days of like companies looking for just a 4.0 student are like not there anymore. There's an exception. There are some companies, that are going after research and development. They're going after those things, but majority of companies are okay with, a 3.0 and higher. involved in extracurricular, you're working, you're showing that you can multitask and carry different things and not just, regurgitate what teachers are telling me and I've got good grades, but I'm involved with clubs, I've worked, or I've had an internship while being a student. Those are all things that stand out because an employer can say, oh, you're actually able to juggle your life and not just focus on one task. The other thing is really knowing how to communicate and ask for help, ask questions. If you're not comfortable talking to people or even being able to like dumb down our engineering language, because most of the people you work with won't be engineers. You'll be surprised. You'll work with engineers and there's the rest of the company that you have to talk to. And so companies are really looking for people that are kind of laid back, confident, able to communicate, handling different people, different personalities. And so UB's great. It's very diverse. Don't find yourself only around one type of people. Get used to talking, interacting with other people, other disciplines.
Can you dive into the different disciplines of engineering, whether it be design, technical sales, etc., and what they do?
Yeah. So I'll try to walk through some of the roles, and every company will have different names for them, but you've got test equipment. So these are going to be the engineers who are designing how you're testing a product, whether it's for production or test qualification. And so it doesn't need to fly. It doesn't need to go to a customer, but it needs to be robust for ultimate loads. And so you're doing a lot of stress analysis. You're doing a lot of design. It's usually integrating software, electronics, mechanics. But you're usually supporting the entire company. So different programs will come in and you've got to adapt the test equipment. A product engineer or manufacturing engineer, different roles, but typically a product engineer, they're working the sustainment of a product. So once something new has been built and qualified, it's now being built and sold to the public or sold to a customer. They're the ones making sure that it's continuing to be built at volume. So they're writing the instructions on how to build it. They're troubleshooting it when you're out there. You're working with technicians mainly. They're the ones who are building everything. And then you've got manufacturing engineers. So these are the engineers who are really running the machine shop. So they're not the machinist, but they're knowing how to code CNC machines and they're running all the programming on, I've got to machine this manifold or turn this piston. And they're the ones who can tell you your design's garbage, change your drawing, I can't produce it. But still technical skills. You've got design engineers. So typically these are the ones that are going in and doing the actual analysis, all of your statics, dynamics, all of these things, they start coming in play. And believe it or not, you never need a formula page. Every company has routines, they have products, they know what they're doing. And so you're not, deriving something from scratch. You're usually coming in, you've got loads, free body diagrams, coming up with the design, getting yelled at by the machinist because you just designed something that they can't machine, working through that. And then the design can split into a lot of different roles. They can be systems engineers who are looking at, that's your, MATLAB, MathCAD, ANSYS modeling, flow analysis, temperature. You've got stress people that they're just working in ANSYS, they're working with SolidWorks FEA. And so that is their discipline. Someone says, I've got this design, make sure it doesn't break for pressure and loads, vibe loads, temperature. There's project engineers. That's what I've done recently and what I'm managing. They're the engineers who hopefully know the whole life cycle of a program from proposal to end of production. And they're making sure that you as a company are executing on time to cost. And so a proposal comes in and you say, we can get it done for 10,000 hours in 2 years. So your job is to make sure that all the different people that I talked about before are all working well together to get it done for hopefully less and sooner, or talking to the customer when it's more expensive and later. So that one's nice if you're more comfortable with talking to people and not getting too much into the technical side. Technical sales is nice if you have a technical background. You're now going out and selling the product, or you're meeting with customers, potential customers, for what the next innovation is, or how your company's products can meet their needs. And so usually that's a lot of travel. So if you're single or you're just like, I want to see the world, and you like traveling and talking to different people, getting into a technical sales position is probably more of your flavor. It helps if you've done product and you understand your company's products, but as an engineer, usually you can figure it out pretty quick.
Um, so should students focus on a single discipline or should they build more general skill sets?
It really depends on what you're interested in. You know, a lot of what I was speaking to is as a mechanical aerospace engineer. I know there's industrial engineers, right? They might go more the quality engineering route or lean, Six Sigma, continuous improvement routes. So you really want to think like, what excites me, and then get into that. So growing up, I wanted to either be in the military or help the military. So I went mechanical aerospace, and that was my discipline, and then looked for companies that help soldiers. But there's people who get a mechanical engineering degree and they work in HVAC, they work in NASCAR or commercial automobiles. So even once you find what you're passionate for, try to figure out, well, how can I get there? Some people love to read and make sure rules are followed. You know, those are usually your IEs, your quality engineers, looking at a lot of specs, not so much design. So it's hard, I think, as a student because you have no idea what engineering looks like. I think I used to be like, I'm an engineer. I'm going to be like Tony Stark's. I'm going to walk into a room and come out and I'll have like something that flies. And then you realize that unless you're working at Boeing, Lockheed, at their tier component, maybe you're working on a full system. Almost everyone just makes components. And so recognizing that you might work on an actuator that goes in an aircraft or a propulsion thruster that goes in a satellite versus the entire satellite or the entire system. And even if you work at Boeing, we work with guys at their Phantom Works. They work on just the wing controls, and they have an entirely different team that does the fuselage. So it's very rare that you're going to get the entire system and like get to build it. You're going to get focused in one area. And so I think it's recognizing, again, you find where you're passionate first, what you enjoy doing, what you're good at, and then you can navigate in there. There's probably endless roles engineers can get into. And even having an engineering degree, if you want to go into business or different things afterwards, you think differently. I think we think better because we like to solve problems. We look at things differently. So most companies are excited to see just you're an engineer by skill, and we can fit you in, you know, where your passions lie.
Let's say a student knows what discipline of engineering they want to go into. What can they do while still in college to prepare for that?
Honestly, I think it's just looking for an internship because you could go to as many classes as you want on fluid dynamics and heat transfer, and you still have no idea what that looks like in the real world. And unless you really enjoy what you're doing in the labs here, that's more research and development, maybe some testing on new materials. So the sooner you start looking for internships in the field that you're interested in, the better you're going to have an idea of like, is this really what I want? There are, you know, multiple ways. I found one website that they interview tens of thousands of career professionals. So you can learn, you watch the interview and you're like, oh, this is what the work everyday task is like, or this is, you know, what they're going to be doing. I will say with engineering, I was amazed at the amount of paperwork that engineers produce. It's not always turning wrenches and testing things. It is a lot of documentation and paperwork, but not like the 50 to 100 page reports you write for your labs. Everyone wants it concise and short, and so you've got to learn how to summarize things. But
So, talking about documents, would you have to worry about like standardizing a lot and like following specific policies and codes?
the first company I got hired at had an entire technical writer division. And so the engineers would write a report and then you'd send it to the technical writers and they would fix all your spelling and grammar and formatting. And even now I'll sit in design reviews and for some reason engineers like to just point out you spelled that word wrong. You know, those things tend to catch eyes. But you really don't have to worry too much about that. I mean, you have to check the things, the emails you're going to send to the boss or customer, your presentations that you're going to look for. It's a lot of PowerPoint. But all the reports I've written, it's kind of like there's no MLA format. You're not citing things. Get it in the most concise way possible. And a lot of companies have their own standards, templates you just pull up, erase what someone else wrote, and put in your information. You got to graduate. But I will say there was a class I took as a grad student, and it was technical writing, and that was actually a helpful class. And they should allow you to skip English and take that class because we've all done English in high school, and we're not writing a whole lot, but learning how to communicate technically is an art. You know, you've seen people or professors who have taken a slide and it is just littered with information and you don't even know what to comprehend. Some people go into the workforce and they do that, and that's just not good practice.
What is expected to know going into the job, if there's anything, and what emphasis should students put on skills such as MATLAB and SolidWorks?
If you're going to be good at MATLAB or SolidWorks, you're probably wanting to go into systems or stress analysis. And if you're really not competent in it, don't talk it up in your interview and end up there, because it's diverse enough in the field. So if you're like passionate about MATLAB or SolidWorks FEA, like run with it, get good at it, have examples that you can talk to in your interview, print out, you know, sample codes or things that you can bring with you to show, hey, I designed this, I modeled this. But almost every company uses a different software than what you use here. So there's always a learning curve. No one ever expects a graduate to come out of school and just like pick it up. There's like a 3-month minimum, learn how our company does stuff. And so if you're going to tout that you're good at something, you got to actually be good at it, because then they're going to probably give you a little more work than what the average graduate coming out of, who just is like, yep, I took that class, I passed, I understand it, I could ask a senior guy for help and pick it up. But if you're in an interview and you're like, I own coding, there's a good chance you're going to get thrown on a project, and then people are going to realize like, you really don't. So you don't want to be there. But if you're finding there's things that you're really good at, you really enjoy, dive into it, and then you speak to those things at your interview, and hopefully you're interviewing for a position where that is going to be utilized.
Within, say a student gets a job that they really enjoy, and they're at a company that they really like working for, and they don't want to switch jobs, but they do want to get more money. How long does it take, and what does it take to grow within one specific company?
Yeah, so a lot of that depends on the company and the economy. We all lived through COVID. Companies were not handing out raises during COVID. I worked in the commercial aircraft division, and airlines stopped flying. So it was like, I'm just happy to come to work today and not getting laid off. And so you really got to be sensitive to, how is my company performing? What is the economy like? As things are picking back up, I think it's okay to say to your bosses, or to go above them to their boss and say, I really like working here, and I need more money. I'm worth more money. And then you got to present your case. For me, it was probably every about 3 or 4 years, I would go in and say that. At one point, I did apply to another company with the sole intention of just trying to get an offer to force my company to pay me more. And after interviewing, I recognized they really need somebody, and I'm wasting that company's time. And so I actually called and withdrew my application. I definitely do not recommend that approach. I think it's a little shady. And usually what will happen is, if you're going to stay at your company, they might counter, but now you feel like you owe them something. And it kind of messes that balance of, am I going to continue working for you? Do I owe you more stuff? Where you can just ask, and at some point, if they're unwilling to pay you what you think you're worth, then you've probably discovered this isn't where I'm going to grow, and then you go somewhere else. For me, that was the point I hit when I applied for a manager position. I had previously filled in for my old boss when she was on maternity leave for 12 weeks. I was on the program or the team for 8 years, and it was like literally being groomed to be the manager. And then when they hired a different person in the team or in the company who's never worked on the products, to me, I was like, well, that's kind of clear. I've not got any more opportunity to grow. With that company, it was interesting. They were foreign owned. And so I will say it does matter who owns the company you're working for. The company I was working at first was owned by a company in England. They move a lot slower, and it forces the company you work for to not be able to make decisions. They have to run it up the corporate ladder. And so things get delayed. And so be mindful of, is the headquarters and the ownership of the company I'm working at physically here, or is it overseas and, people who aren't even aware of the work that I'm doing? I did talk to my boss, after I didn't get that job, and they said, we've got opportunity. We can't tell you though, because it needs to be approved all the way up the ladder. So that's when I decided I'll go find my own opportunity. So two things happen in people. You either work hard and then you'll just continue to work hard for someone else if you're not being compensated, or you completely compromise and you just stop working hard. It's two different types of people, but I prefer you be the first one and just go work hard for someone else, and not let just like the corporate mindset sometimes bog you down, where then you're just showing up to work instead of enjoying work.
So, how important is getting extra education, for example, an engineering management degree or a dual degree or any graduate degrees?
Um, so I graduated a long time ago. At the time, I did not want to get a master's in engineering. I was tired of engineering. And the philosophy I tell a lot of students through the club that I run is, if possible, get a job and your company will pay for your master's degree. You will not make the money back by skipping a year of salary or 2 years of salary getting a master's degree. You're going to come out with no job experience, and they're not going to pay you what you're hoping to get paid. So my recommendation is, if possible, get a job and then get your master's. I didn't want to get a master's degree. I took my FE exam and passed. So when I graduated, I felt like that was my feather in the cap. I don't have a master's degree, but I passed the fundamentals of engineering exam. I don't know that you need a master's. That's one of the nice things about engineering. I think you can still go far. Some companies might not let you get into management if you don't have a master's degree. It's not necessarily the case at Moog, but they were paying for schooling, and I figured, what the heck, I'll go back and try something in management again to try to set me apart from other people looking to bid on it. Going back to college when you're married and have 3 kids is not fun. So if you are going to go and get a degree, I definitely recommend doing it before you're settled down with kids. But at the same time, getting a degree in management right out of college, you still don't have any work experience. So it's unlikely you'll get hired as a manager. So just keep that in mind. Don't go through and be like, oh, I did the 5-in-1 program. I got my master's in engineering, management, and now I'm going to go manage people. Definitely not how it works.
Can you just give general advice for success, whether it be work-life balance or things that you wish you would have done differently personally, things like that?
So I'm really big on work-life balance. I think you guys are growing up in a generation where now that's almost the norm at companies, where before it was like, you are the slave to the company and you'll do everything they ask. So my advice would be is don't be consumed by work. It won't be healthy for your marriage. It won't be healthy for your kids. And you're not working to work. All of us are getting jobs in fields we want to work in so we can enjoy life. Unless you don't, and then don't get married and just work. You can do that. But you really want to be mindful and recognize that there are limits. Working 50, 60 hours a week, every week, probably isn't going to be healthy. There are some jobs that do that. I know SpaceX, for example, is a company that it's like 60 to 80 hours a week that they're having their entry-level engineers working. It's a lot of work. They usually work there for 3 or 4 years, and then they go work somewhere else, and they have a great resume, and then they're not working 80 hours a week. So I think it's really recognizing what's important to you, and sticking to it. I started blocking off my calendar so I could leave at 4:30 every day, to be home by 5. So finding those things. I also wake up at 5 to go to the gym, and I get to work about an hour before most people. So finding that balance, but making sure that it's not just a work-centered life. You really want to make sure the hobbies you're interested in, the things that you enjoy, that you're going to work to pay for, that you do those.
So, what would you say your motivation is to reach your potential?
To reach, you're saying my potential as a manager or in engineering?
Just in general, what's your motivation just to to keep you going and to really just push to go to the next level, just because you've just been so successful yourself?
Um, I mean, for me, a lot of uh, what propels me is really my faith. So I got involved with a club in college here. Basic is actually the club, and there's a proverb that says, "I can make plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail." And so I kept saying, "Man, I've wanted to get into military. I've wanted to help these things." That's something that was inside of me before I even knew it. And so just knowing, like, if there's desires inside of you, things that you've loved to do or longed to do, even as a kid, you've got everything inside of you to get there, and to not lose focus on that. But I would say a lot of it is recognizing, like, I've got these talents, I've got these gifts, and I'm not the type of person who's just going to be lazy. And so recognizing, like, if you want to be the best, if you want to grow the most, you're going to have to put in the work. And it doesn't mean it's an 80-hour work week, but it means you're going to not cut corners. You're going to take on the extra task. You're going to do the extra work when it's there because you want to get there. You want to see it done properly and completely.
In any area of your life, specifically engineering or not, what are some things that you wish you would have done differently that you think could help us as students?
That's a good question. For me, there were some things I wish I took maybe more chances on when I was younger. Now my situation was different. I got married right after college, so the ability to take chances was minimized. I had some trips where I could have gone to the UAE first class to help support a customer, and it didn't work out. But different opportunities to go overseas, like being a younger engineer coming out of college, have your passport ready if you're with a company that travels, so you can be available to go on an overseas trip or volunteer for those things that you just normally wouldn't do. One of the things I wish I did earlier, when you're with a company and they do travel, only fly one airline and stay at one hotel. The first 2 years, I would just like book it, what worked, and then you have points that you can't use because they're all over. So if you're going to travel for work, pick an airline and a hotel, and that is what you do. So that's one thing I wish I did sooner, because it does benefit you later.
So before we move on to questions from the audience, is there anything else you would like to say, or any other advice that you'd like to give?
Um, I would say don't be discouraged if there are classes that you're like, I hate this and I'm never going to use it. Because it's a high likelihood you will never use it. Especially if it's a topic in a class you don't like, you're probably not going to go pursue a job that's doing it every day. However, what they're teaching you here at school is how to solve problems, to give you the resolve to when you're working at a company and there's a failure and they've got to get results. It's that being able to burn the midnight oil. I've gone in and supported testing at 2 in the morning, and worked all the way to 9 a.m. and then went home and slept because I was like, well, that had to get done, but you're not getting 2 full days out of me. So really recognizing, like, the things that you're not enjoying here, there's still a purpose. So don't just like throw in the towel. You've got to graduate. There's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. But also start thinking about, like, what are you excited about? What excites you? If it's clean energy, start looking up companies that work in that. If it's military, start looking into companies that do that. If it's aerospace and satellites, look into companies that do that and start getting excited about, like, why am I here? Why am I taking these classes? And don't be too upset if you do the whole, like, fill up and purge every semester. You still retain some things. And
All right, so we will just open it up to the audience now. If anyone just wants to raise their hand if they have any questions.
So you mentioned that to go out and ask questions to different colleagues. So say like you were low on work and you wanted to reach out to like a different manager. Say that you were in the engineering team and you wanted to like talk to the production team, but you saw that the manager was like super busy. How would you go about like asking them to help out, like ease their load, without like making them too stressed of getting you?
yeah. So first you go through your manager, right? So you would go to your manager and be like, hey, I'm really looking for work. And the first thing he'll do is ask other people around you on your team. And then he'll also go out, but then it's good to go out and just either walk by if you see the manager at their desk. Like sometimes an email isn't going to get read, but you can just walk by in person and be like, hey, I noticed like things are really busy. I got some downtime. Is there anything I can help with? And just being really like, it's not like, well, you suck at your job and you're buried. No, it's like, I see you're busy. I'm not. How can I help? And just being humble and saying, I'll do anything. You know, if I've got to sort this or do this, it doesn't have to be, there's nothing below me, right? I'm here to serve. And having that kind of mindset, or finding other people that you know are busy and just asking them, like, how can I help you do stuff? So it doesn't always have to go through management. Other people might be able to, more senior engineers can offload some stuff that they just don't have time for.
Thank you.
My name is Damien. I'm a transfer student. I transferred in this semester, and like previously, like my whole experience with college was just like online because of COVID. So this semester, I was able to like firsthand see kind of like what engineering is about and kind of what I want to do. I realized I want to be part of like manufacturing, CNC, CADing, stuff like that. Primarily for like automotive companies. And I just wanted to ask, like, since CADing, CNC, like that is a skill, but really, at a certain level, many people already know how to do that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to ask, like, how do you stand out as an individual when you don't have any like experience? Maybe starting out with like a few internships, a few projects. Like, what would you recommend for like somebody who's like dipping their toes into that area to stand out from everyone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you want to get into the machine side, I would maybe look for an internship as a machinist or helping machinist. So now it's not so much technical, but you're learning how the machines function. You're talking to machinists. And so when you're coming out as a, fresh graduate, you've actually got experience on, I know what a 5-axis, lathe is going to do. And I understand, the spindle speeds, and I can program a system. And so now you're talking to the actual product that you're doing. That I think would set you apart more than, well, I can CAD really well. You want to get good at that, but they've got drafters who go and get 2-year degrees from a college that are making the drawings. I don't even know if they have some programs here on programming CNCs, but I would think getting an internship with machinists in a machine shop, or even working here in the school more in their shop, and just learning those things and learning the language of the different shops would set you apart.
You're at like somewhat of a higher level now. Do you see anything in like interviewees or interns or entry level engineers, like things that they do that we should try to avoid since we're starting to approach those positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say like the more humility, the better. There's a trend going, especially with this generation coming out, where they're just like high, lofty demands. And so they'll come and be like, I should get 120,000 coming out of college. And then they're like, okay, click. So like, just like really do your research. If you're applying to a job, pull up, the Department of Labor has like tons of information for zip codes, what the average salaries are for entry engineers. Really do your homework, or have an incredible resume if you're going to come in and be like, I think I'm worth this much money, having never worked in a company before. Another one is, again, do your research on the company you're interviewing for. I was just talking with HR today, and there are people who will call and they know nothing about the company, like at all. And you're just like, why are you applying here? So don't make it, if you did apply to 50 jobs, when you know you have an interview, at least look on the website a day or two before and pick up a couple things to talk to. A lot of companies are looking for excitement. Like, have you looked into the company, what they do? Are you passionate about it? To them, that means retention, right? That you're going to come in, you're going to want to learn because you're excited on the products they work on. And so if you can really talk to those things and tie it into a story, like, man, growing up, I had cousins that served in the military, and like it was so cool. So to be able to work on whatever, right? Like it shows that you've done some research, that you're really passionate about it. I think sets you apart more than just being like blanket application, and then you're just like, I had a really fun time in statics, right? Like they want to get to know you. Usually the first interview you have is a screening interview. You can share some of your technical stuff, but if they're not impressed, they're not even going to send you on to the next manager and the next waves. And so some of that experience is just, if you're sophomore, junior, or if you're a senior and you're panicking right now, apply to a couple companies that you're like, I definitely don't want to work here, and just see how you do on the first interview. And worst case, you end up with a job at a company you don't like, but that stress is gone. Best case is you really learned how to respond in an interview, so you're ready for when you find a company that you actually want to work at. So hopefully that helped.
Anything else?
What is your experience with different measurement systems? So like I know like a lot of the American aerospace usually uses Imperial. What is your experience with machining overseas or having to convert with those units?
Yeah, a lot of the products I worked on was defense, so it was all usually U.S. based. We worked on some pyrotechnic devices for Germany, but all of our drawings were, in inches. We've had a couple. We had a product I took over from England, and we actually converted everything from millimeters to inches. It was a big pain in the butt because the rounding isn't quite clear, but you're not going to have 12 decimal places on a drawing. Usually it's 3. And so at some point you're making decisions and the design is fluctuating. I have heard of, companies having some pretty big problems because they coded something wrong and then you had a satellite end up like 50 miles out of orbit. So they definitely matter. You've got to pay attention to the units, but everything I've worked with is inches, pound force, I don't know, all the fun stuff.
What do you have to say about a professional engineering license in regards to someone trying to pursue entrepreneurial goals?
Yeah, so I actually have my professional engineering license. I got it about 6 years after graduating. Again, I did that because I was like, I really don't want to go back to school. I don't want to get a master's. Having a professional license is, again, going to set me apart from other people. I thought about getting into consulting. In New York State, you have to be a licensed engineer to do that. It's still a possibility in the future, so I can work for myself. I think it's a great idea. I studied for about 6 months, and most companies will continue to pay for your continuing ed, and they'll pay for your license renewal. So the upfront cost is just taking the test and 6 to 8 months of having no life when you study for it, because you have to have at least, I think, 4 years experience before you can take the test. They only offer it twice a year. So, and you graduate in May, you get your diploma in June. So you're usually at about 4.5, 5 years out before you're now taking the exam on all of engineering. And you just did 4 to 5 years in one specific thing. So it is a lot of studying. I think it does set you apart. I've never stamped a single thing in my life, besides a Post-it note just to see what the stamp looked like. But I think it's worth doing. It's good to have as a backup. Depending on the companies you work for, you may need it. Again, it's mainly civil engineers that are getting licensed and having to sign off on stuff. Yeah, consulting stuff. So even in New York State, if I started a consulting company, I'm licensed. You could work for me and I can sign off on your work. So you don't have to be licensed, but if you want to run it, if you want to do freelance stuff, it's definitely recommended.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aside from researching a company you're applying to, do you have any other advice with nailing an interview?
I think really be as comfortable as you can. It's obviously terrifying and you're nervous because you're like, how I do here depends on if I'm going to have a job and potential future. But I think also just thinking about some examples beforehand. I mean, there's tons of examples online you can look for of interviewing questions, but really prepare. They're going to ask you what's a weakness? Have you dealt with any really troublesome people in your life and how'd you handle it? They want to know, it's an imperfect world. How do you deal with it? And you'll be amazed, some people will blatantly be honest, and you're like, why would you ever tell someone that? I'll never hire you. Because they're like, yeah, I just told the guy to F off and like stomped out. And you're like, what? So really like practice, have in your mind what you want to say so you don't just off the cuff say something that is just like, you'd be amazed. So I think working through those and having like good examples of, when have I overcome diversity? When did I work well in a team dynamic where I was leading or not leading? How I responded to poor leadership and stepping in, right? We've all had the group project where the one kid isn't doing anything and you're like, I am not failing this class because of you. How did you navigate that and find a way to do it in a way that's a little more elegant than like, I just did all their work. And so the people interviewing you can tell like, okay, this is someone who thinks on their feet. Again, a lot of companies, at least at Moog, we're really looking for culture over intelligence, right? Like we can teach you how to engineer. It's very difficult to teach people culture, how to interact with people. So if you fit the culture well, if you're just a type of person who can adapt and respond to situations, they're going to be comfortable like, okay, I can teach you things. Because every company is different, so you got to relearn a lot of stuff anyways.
Like, is it all right to not have an internship your junior year? And like, if you get one your senior year as well, is that like?
Yeah, it's definitely like when I was looking as a sophomore, I was way too early. Most people start looking as a junior. Usually don't get anything because all the seniors, right, got all the internships. So I would say start as soon as you can. As long as you have a internship, it helps you. If you have no internship, hopefully you've volunteered or worked in other camps or have like something to talk to about like team dynamics and how you fit in besides just as a student. So I think that's the biggest value of an internship. So if you don't have an internship, it's not like you can't get a job, right? Maybe you worked on some grad projects or some different things that really set you apart, but you want to also tie in like, I'm cultured, I can do this, I've developed these things.
So you said you were involved in on-campus organization, Basic. Did you want to elaborate on what they do and how you're involved with that?
Yeah, I can do that. So Basic is basically a Christian club on campus, like a small church service. My wife and I have been running it for about 14 years now. So we're here every Monday night, and it's really helping people discover their own faith and walk in it. You don't have to be a Christian to come. It's a great community. So that's kind of the plug for that. I think it's important, like, be in academic clubs, but you've got to also, again, to get cultured, to get stretched, be in different things that, again, are in diversity, because you're going to go into a workplace. Not everyone is engineers. Not everyone looks like you. Not everyone thinks like you. And so getting that exposure is huge. I would say Basic is probably one of the most diverse groups, people-wise and major-wise. But definitely you can check it out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your valuable insight and knowledge and wisdom. If we can just get another round of applause for Tom.
Thanks, guys.
All right. And that's a wrap. Thank you to everyone that came, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Basic does start at 8 o'clock if you're ever interested in that.
I'll just say real quick, if you guys don't care about Basic, but you have questions on engineering, every Monday night I am on campus. I'm okay if you swing by at the end just to ask questions. I won't be offended. UB Theater, SU 210, it's around, but I love being able to give help, so feel free to reach out.